Hi, this is James Shugg with Westpac London's end of day report for Tuesday, April the 10th, back after a couple of weeks out of the office. And it's a significant down day for equity markets, with Europe in particular catching up after a couple of days of when markets were closed, catching up to the weaker jobs news that we saw out of the US on Friday night. But US markets were down again today as well. It's 5 days running now. We've seen a loss on the US. At the moment, with the US still trading, of course, today, we're looking at a loss of more than 3% on the Dow over those 5 days. The main drivers, or the main news today, I suppose I should say, was in the US. We had a fall in small business confidence reported by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Quite a big drop, the first fall in 7 months in that index, and one of the components, the intention to hire index, posted its first non-positive reading, i.e. zero, in quite some time, actually since May last year, kind of warning us post the fact that the March jobs numbers might be somewhat softer, as indeed they were in the US. We also had, though, a bounce in economic confidence reported by IBD-TIPP. That's the first read in April on how consumers feel in the US, and it reversed the March decline. Other news in Europe, we had the Centix survey of investor confidence post its first fall for the year. It was down from -8 to -15, and that's actually the steepest drop in that index of how investors feel about the economy and markets. The steepest drop since the European traumas of the last summer really pushed equities sharply lower. We did have some good news on German exports, back-to-back rises in January and February, with the February rise driven mainly by demand for goods from outside of Europe. So they're the main economic news stories today. We actually get the US earnings season starting tonight after the market closes, with Alcoa reporting. So there may be some nervousness ahead of that driving US markets somewhat weaker. But I think that there's also just this sense that markets had got a little bit carried away with the prospects for the global economic outlook. Certainly the US numbers have been printing weaker of late, and it could be a repetition of what we saw in early 2010 and again in early 2011, when optimism in markets, driven by a run of good data, economic data in part at least, saw markets price in Fed tightening and a stronger outlook for the US and global economies. Now those bouts of optimism were premature, and we're starting to see some signs that maybe the optimism about the US economy earlier this year might have been a little bit misplaced. And certainly Westpac's view is that the economy, although it will continue to grow this year, we're looking at a growth pace below 2%, rather than the number closer to 3% that would be seen as perhaps the start of something a bit more self-sustaining without ongoing Fed support. So what are the actual numbers we've got to report today? In terms of European equities at the close, we've got the FTSE down 2.25%, the French market down 3.1%, and the German market down 2.5%. In Italy, we're looking at a loss there of almost 5%, driven by the banks in particular there, which were marked sharply lower. Spanish markets down about 3% today as well. In European bond markets, we saw Spanish and Italian bond yields up by almost 0.25%, whereas German bond yields actually were declining. So we're seeing that widening or re-widening in intra-European bond yields taking place again, as markets become a little bit more concerned about the European sovereign debt crisis, that just maybe it's not out of the woods just yet. In terms of the US at the moment, US lunchtime, the Dow's down 0.9%. That's at 12,810. Commodity markets mostly down. We've got some gains there in the soft commodities like coffee and soy and corn, but the ones that we usually report on the Report of Australia, we've got copper prices down 1.7% at the moment. Oil is down 1.3% at $101.17 a barrel, and gold's down 0.2% at $1,641 an ounce. The Aussie dollar is at 1.026 against the US dollar, and that's the softest it's been in quite a little while. On Australia too, we've got the Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Survey for April coming out. Recall that it fell in March. The April survey was taken between the 2nd and the 5th of April, so just before Easter during the week. So it'll be interesting to see what was on consumers' minds and at the start of this month, when it looked like the Reserve Bank of Australia might be starting to edge towards cutting rates again, as indeed we think they'll do in May. That'll be one factor perhaps driving sentiment, but there'll be a range of others too, and that's the main number to watch for in the Australian session today. Okay, I'll be back same time tomorrow.